So now we'll go to vitamins. We'll answer the questions at the end. We'll go into vitamins, and vitamins was interesting because it's the category in this webinar that's declining. And it's declining just because, COVID gave it such a giant boost. But across 15 million data points we analyzed, we learned quite a few things. And in vitamins, what's really interesting is there's so many need states. There's so many different problems and benefits that people are trying to solve, and that identifying what those top ones are, it's manually really difficult because you have to sift through all those different things. The overall theme here we've seen is people have gotten less healthier since COVID, right? It sounds almost like a paradox. If there's a big epidemic, people should get healthier. And people did focus a lot on their health, but they were stuck at home. And so people have gained a lot of weight. Their skin is looking worse generally, and they're having problems as a result of those. So what we see here, heart health and weight management are the two quickest growing opportunities in the vitamin and supplement and mineral category. We see mood balance as something. Mood balance is interesting because we also see, which we'll get to later, some cognitive benefits as one of the opportunities. And in terms of decliners, it seems to be things that are nice to have, but they don't really, you could say they're not necessary in some cases. So things like vitamins for your hair or vitamins to help boost your immunity. People, that's just a generally it's less of a steep growth trajectory just because COVID, during the peak of COVID, people were a lot more concerned about immunity. Overall wellness is on a downward trend, but that's specifically in the vitamins category. Mental clarity, energy boosters, and so on. In terms of themes, we found it really interesting because, there's all of these different, let's say, terms that are being used to differentiate products, like it's organic, it's keto friendly, it's dairy free, and so on. We always find it interesting to find what do consumers care about the most. In a specific category, where are those opportunities? Because you can find a lot of these niches that are sort of becoming highly competitive and demand is not outpacing that competition, and so on. Kosher is a new opportunity we found. We didn't see it much before in the past. Gelatin-free is interesting as well, and sugar-free and gluten-free continue to trend upward. In terms of forms, we found a lot of interesting forms like sticks, right? This is relatively small area, but growing quite quickly. But the biggest insight here is the number one form prediction, which is powders. Powders seem to go hand in hand with the logic that consumers are looking for more convenience, and powders are often used in things like drinks you can take on the go, right? So it might be, a wellness or immunity kind of powder that you add to some water, you shake it up and you take it while you're leaving. In terms of sensory attributes, we analyzed 43 sensory attributes, and we saw fizzy as something growing, dissolvable as something growing, flavored. And flavors is interesting because of its sort of share of voice is pretty large and its growth rate is also large. And so that's something we would say to look closer into, is how to differentiate products' flavors, especially if it's a gummy vitamin, for example, or a chewable vitamin. How do you make it so people come to that product, they pick it among others because of its flavor? For ingredients, we see some interesting ingredient trends like glucosamine, something that helps with joint health, for example, as growing. This could be a consequence or sort of a consequence of people being less healthy over the last year or two, and now they're starting to go back, get more exercise, and as a result experience joint pain. Or it could be a result of, without that activity, they're just starting to have more joint pain. That would line up with MSM, which is used for arthritis, right? And so on. In terms of decliners, we see a lot of these sort of ingredients that are giving benefits that are more nice to have rather than necessary. So you can still function without them. So blueberry extract, I think this grew really quickly. There might have been some immunity boost claims back a year ago or so, amino acids, and so on. For flavors, Because again, one thing we saw going up was consumer interest in vitamin flavors and vitamin tastes. We decided to dive into what are the flavors consumers are looking for, what do they care about? And we saw strawberry and citruses and grape and cherry going up. Meanwhile, some more exotic flavor like banana is going down and vanilla is also going down. We dove into stress-induced needs because we saw stress as a need state that was rising, and we wanted to understand what inside of that, sort of what are those sort of consequences of stress that consumers are looking to solve. And we saw a lot of cognitive stuff at the top, things like boosting energy or thinking more clearly, overall cognitive function. And this was interesting because it sort of indicates that people are associating stress a lot with productivity, and that maybe those two things are in the same niche, same sort of box, right? People are getting more stressed because they're sort of having to think more or having to work harder and so on, be more organized. And with life changing a lot as quarantines start to end or as people start to go back and commute to work, then it becomes more difficult for them with that environment change cognitively. Here are two examples of brands. So there's Nervive and there's Vitafusion's Brain Food that have addressed these concerns and sort of gotten ahead of this trend where consumers are really focusing on cognitive health. And these two brands have sort of recognized that trend and gotten ahead, and they seem to be pretty well prepared for this upcoming trend. In terms of ingredients, consumers are most actively associating with stress remedy. We saw one surprise here was beetroot. Now, this doesn't mean beetroot is coming up the most in the data. It means it's coming up with the highest growth rate in the data, but it is still relatively small with only 0.02% share of voice. Some other things, but I think the largest share of voice here would be magnesium. And so magnesium has a pretty strong growth rate, around 72% year on year. And so that might be an easier opportunity to look into to help consumers solve their stress-related needs. For declines, stress-related ingredients are things like vitamin E, vitamin D3, amino acids has been declining, and melatonin and potassium. And in terms of weight loss needs, so as you all might recall, one of the need states that was really growing quickly was weight management. So what are the sort of consequences consumers are trying to solve those different use cases inside weight management? And we see sleep aid. Sleep aid was really surprising for us, as well as hydration, as sort of when consumers are saying that they are focused on weight management, what are the consequences there? So they're not sleeping as well. And they're requiring to be hydrated more often. Extra strength was interesting, as well as whole foods, looking for an alternative to those whole foods or how to capture the same nutrients from them. Some digestion issues like constipation, and gummy vitamins was very fascinating because this lines up with the increasing preference on flavors. It identifies a way to access that is to focus on different flavors in gummy vitamins for weight loss and weight management. For predicted decliners, we see things like energy or high quality, certified organic. So overall, what I see here, high potency as well, are sort of the claims on a product that are, let's kind of say, those nice but not necessary kind of claims: highest quality, certified organic, and overall health, and so on. And so people are looking for things that will really change their day-to-day life rather than marginally improve it. For natural themes, again, we dove into natural consumer conversations about vitamins. So when there's a natural product, what do they really pull away from that? What was the motivating factor to purchase? And things, these trendy diets like paleo and keto are not really driving purchase in the natural area of vitamins, but sugar-free and gluten-free and even gelatin-free are. And gelatin-free would be interesting because we just said gummies is an area to innovate around. So how do you create gummies that are gelatin-free to solve that consumer needs state? It's definitely an area to focus maybe some R&D resources there. In terms of conclusions for vitamins, what we've seen is COVID has really shifted the focus away from sort of immunity, more specifically, how to make yourself prevent different diseases, different infections, viruses, and so on, and instead to this sense of holistic wellness. How can I improve things like heart health, weight management, even skincare? The next thing we've seen, and this is very similar to what we were talking about in oral care, is this focus on specialization, where consumers are becoming much more focused on these sort of really important, this will help me day to day, change my day-to-day routine, this will make a difference in my life, away from these nice but not necessary use cases. So that's our insights for today. We'll go through the questions in a moment, but if you want to learn more, you can just reach out to this email. We'll also send over, right after this, I think, a presentation, like the PDF of this presentation, and maybe tomorrow or the day after, the recording of the presentation on YouTube.